most ancient of all the Arab countries, historic center of pan-Arabism, resistance to foreign occupation, and one of the most beautiful countries on the earth, or at least it was. That is, before the last 4 years nearly, in which the country has been torn to shreds. More than 200,000 of its people killed, millions of its people displaced or made refugees. And the economic loss to Syria of the last 4 years, well, I simply could not calculate that, and I don't think anyone else could either. Here's an example of what virtually every town, village, hamlet in Syria now looks like. It has been total war. It looks like Berlin in 1945, and that's because the scale of the fighting has been so great. And I'm asking tonight, who is to blame for Syria's 200,000 dead and all the rest of the damage? Well, it would take me longer than I've got to fully apportion all of the blame, certainly to put percentages on it. So let me just run through, at random as it were, all the different individuals and countries and states and governments and organizations, multinational, international and regional, who have to take some of the blame for the catastrophe. I'm sorry to say that the first part of the blame I'm going to allocate is to the regime in Syria itself. It had many years to reform itself. After the transfer of power to President Bashar al-Assad, we were promised all kinds of reforms. Some reforms did take place, but mainly on the economic front and mainly to the disadvantage of ordinary Syrians. Those reforms freed up what had been a largely state-dominated economy, freed them up from, you might say, the socialism of a previous era. So free enterprise, privatization, and so on were all unleashed on the Syrian people. I think largely to their disadvantage, but that is my own ideological point of view. What never happened is that political reform did not march side by side with economic reform, which it should have done. I myself conveyed to the Syrian authorities many, many times the need to quicken the pace or even just start the kind of reforms that needed to be carried out. Secondly, the reform movement, revolution, Arab Spring, call it what you like, when it arose in Syria, the Syrian regime handled it extremely badly, particularly in the area of Derra, where absolute brutality, savagery was meted out to people merely painting political slogans on walls or daring to raise political slogans calling for the democratization of the country. The third area of responsibility rests with the Syrian opposition internally, who turned to arms, militarized their protest movement long before they had to, and with catastrophic results. What they could have done, should have done, was maintain a stance of peaceful, unarmed protest demanding change and reform. But they very, very quickly militarized that situation. The fourth area of responsibility lies with the foreigners who then flooded into Syria in their hundreds of thousands. I used to say 100,000. Actually, now I believe it is hundreds of thousands of foreigners. Not just Arabs, I mean. In a way, they're not foreigners, if you believe in pan-Arabism. I'm talking about people from Chechnya, talking about people from Kenya, from Somalia. I'm talking about people from Portsmouth and East London and Birmingham and Manchester. I'm talking about people who were living their lives here in Britain or in Belgium or in the Netherlands or in France or in Germany or in Sweden or in Denmark, who had grown up in Western countries, have nothing whatsoever to do with Syria, nothing whatsoever to do with the Arab world, don't speak or didn't speak a word of Arabic, didn't understand anything of the complexities of Syrian society, which is a society containing dozens of religions, several nationalities, ethnicities, Kurdish people, Arabic people, Druze, Muslims, Sunni, Shia, Christians. Many, many strands went into the making of the tapestry of Syrian society. Its Christian population, for example, 2,000 years old, still speaking the language of Jesus, Aramaic, with some of the most treasured historic religious places, shrines important to Shia people, to Christian people, many, many others. The next layer of responsibility, and I'm ascending in order of importance now, is the Arab regimes, every one of them rotten to the core, every one of them a dictatorship itself, every one of them practicing one family rule, who poured billions, tens, scores of billions of dollars into the destruction of Syria, all in the name of human rights, freedom, and democracy, when there are no human rights, no freedom, no democracy in their own countries. And you know the states to which I refer. And lastly, to the Western countries, the former colonial powers, Britain, France, the United States of America, who piled in, forcing their satrapies in the Persian Gulf to pay for their policy of doing everything, including killing anyone, everyone, in order to bring about the downfall of the Syrian regime. Not for any of the bad things about the Syrian regime, not at all, but for the good things about the Syrian regime, because the Syrian regime was backing the Palestinian resistance, the Lebanese resistance, because the Syrian regime had relations, good ones, with the Islamic Republic of Iran. That's why the colonial powers wanted to destroy Syria. I could now go on to talk about the United Nations, but what's the use?